They say no one can buy love. But that night, standing under the cold glow of Manhattan's sleepless skyline, billionaire Lucas Stone tried anyway. It was midnight when Lily Bennett heard the knock. It was soft, too soft for a man whose voice usually cut through marble boardrooms like a blade. She opened the door and found him standing there. Lucas Stone, 38 years old, widowed, father of a little boy who slept just down the hall, and the owner of this penthouse that smelled like polished steel and old grief. He did not say her name at first. He just looked at her in a way he never did, not like an employer watching his nanny, but like a man who had run out of ways to stay alive without asking for something that might destroy him. She noticed the white envelope in his hand, crisp and thick. His fingers trembled. Lily spoke first. "You should be sleeping," she whispered. "Oliver finally drifted off. He asked for you 3 times. Lucas stepped closer, the envelope hanging between them like both a weapon and a shield. He did not blink when he said it. $1 million. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She almost laughed because that number did not fit inside her small bedroom with flower stickers on the wall and a stuffed rabbit that belonged to Oliver, but his eyes told her this was not a joke. $1 million for what? Her voice cracked on the last word. 1 night. With me. Silence sucked the air from the hallway. Lily could hear Oliver's nightlight humming down the hall. She could hear her heart threatening to hammer its way out of her chest. Why me? She hated how small she sounded. Lucas's jaw twitched. Because you are the only person I trust. Because tomorrow I might lose the only thing that still makes sense in my life, and I do not know any other way to keep him. His words spilled out, raw and sharp. Because you do not lie. Because you are the only real thing in this house. Lily stepped back, but the door behind her felt like a wall. Her bare feet were cold on the wooden floor. Her hands shook. She thought of Oliver curled under his dinosaur blanket. She thought of herself at 16, alone in a foster home, promising she would never sell herself for anything. Lucas lifted the envelope slightly. It looked heavier than steel in his palm. 1 night. 1 promise. That is all I ask. Lily shook her head. She felt it before she spoke it. You cannot buy that. You cannot buy me. He looked at her then, really looked. Not the way men on the street looked at her. Not with hunger, but with something closer to desperation, maybe closer to grief. I know I cannot buy you, Lily, but maybe I can buy 1 night of pretending. And if pretending is all I have left to protect him, I will pay any price. She did not answer. She just stared at the envelope like it was a snake ready to strike. She thought about closing the door, locking it, running far from this penthouse of glass and gold. But she did not move, and neither did he. Somewhere behind them a clock struck 1. The city kept breathing. Cars moved down Fifth Avenue like veins carrying secrets. And in that hallway a billionaire offered a girl who had never been touched a price that felt like poison, and salvation at once. Lily's throat burned as she whispered to herself, They say no one can buy love, but tonight someone might try. By morning, the envelope was still on her nightstand. Lily had not touched it. She barely slept, listening for Oliver's soft breathing through the baby monitor, wondering how the same walls that kept him safe could feel like a prison for her. Lucas Stone had built these walls himself, at least the parts that money could buy. 20 years ago, he was just another boy from Brooklyn, with nothing but his mother's old Bible and a hunger to never be powerless again. By 30, he owned half the skyline that now mocked him through the glass windows of his penthouse. He had been called ruthless, brilliant, untouchable, but no headline ever called him what he was at 2 a.m, leaning against Lily's doorway with his shoulders hunched like a man about to lose his last war. His wife Helen had died 3 years ago in a car crash that no one could explain. Some people whispered it was suicide. Some called it an accident that should have killed him too. Only Lucas knew what it really was, a punishment for secrets he never spoke and doubts he never voiced. After Helen's funeral, he buried himself in mergers and high-rise deals, hiring nannies to raise Oliver while he stayed in boardrooms chasing profit he could not spend fast enough. Then came Lily Bennett. She was 20 when she first knocked on his kitchen door, wearing secondhand jeans and carrying a backpack with a single textbook and her resume scribbled on loose-leaf paper. She needed money for her teaching degree. She needed something stable. What she did not know then was that she would become the only stable thing in this entire house. Lily was patient in a way that unnerved Lucas. She read Oliver bedtime stories in silly voices that made the boy giggle until he fell asleep. She mended small things too: scraped knees, broken Lego towers, bad dreams. She never asked for more hours or extra pay. She never asked Lucas about Helen, though sometimes she caught him staring at the nursery door like he was seeing a ghost he could never touch. She had secrets too. Lily never told anyone that she grew up shuffling through foster homes that smelled of bleach and cold dinners, or that she had learned early to keep her legs closed and her mouth shut if she wanted to stay safe. She thought she had left that world behind when she stepped into this glass tower and traded cheap ramen for fresh fruit and warm blankets. But now there was an envelope on her nightstand that smelled like her old life in ways she hated to admit. Downstairs, Lucas sat at the kitchen island, staring into a black mug of coffee that had long gone cold. He had not slept either. His lawyers had warned him that Helen's parents were ready to take him to court. They claimed Oliver deserved a normal home, a mother's touch, a family that did not look like a fortress of marble and secrets. And they were right. That was the worst part. Oliver deserved all of it, and Lucas could not lose him. Not now. Not when he was the last thing that felt real. His mind replayed the look on Lily's face when he made his offer. He hated himself for every word, but what choice did he have? He could not stand in a courtroom alone, painted as a cold father with no family and no wife, a lonely billionaire with a child that might not even share his blood. No judge would pick him over Helen's wealthy, respectable parents, who still wore grief like an expensive coat. He needed Lily, not just her body, not even her innocence, though that cut deeper than he would ever admit. He needed her loyalty in a world where everything else could be bought or buried. She was the only promise he still believed could be kept. Upstairs, Lily finally moved from the edge of her bed. She found Oliver's little t-shirt folded on her dresser and pressed it to her chest like armor. She told herself she would say no. She would march into the kitchen and hand back the envelope and walk away. But her hands would not let go of the fabric. At 7:30, Oliver woke up crying for her. She went to him without thinking, scooping him into her arms. He curled against her like he always did, small hands clutching her hair, the only person in the world who never asked her for anything more than to stay. When she carried him down the stairs, Lucas was still there. Their eyes met over Oliver's head. Neither spoke. The envelope sat on the counter now, its edges crisp as ever, a line neither of them knew how to cross without losing what they both wanted to protect. In the bright kitchen of a billionaire's fortress, Lily Bennett wondered how much one promise could really cost, and if this was the price of saving someone she loved. Did it matter if the whole world called it a transaction? Lily spent the next few days pretending the envelope did not exist, but its weight pressed against her every time she folded Oliver's tiny shirts or read him his bedtime stories. Lucas did not bring it up again, but the silence between them felt different, charged with something neither of them could name or erase. She caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking. He would stand in the doorway of the playroom while she built block towers with Oliver, or linger at the kitchen counter when she washed dishes after dinner. He never said much, but his eyes said enough. He was measuring the distance between a man who could command the world and the woman he could not order to love him. One Thursday night, Oliver fell asleep unusually early. Lily sat alone in the living room, trying to study the notes for her upcoming exams. She told herself that if she could focus on the future, the present would stay quiet. But around midnight, Lucas appeared behind the couch. His steps were soft for a man so tall. He asked her what she was reading. She told him about her education degree, how she hoped to teach kindergarten one day when she was done babysitting other people's children. He listened like no one ever did, nodding once or twice, but mostly just watching her lips move. When she paused, embarrassed by how much she had shared, he surprised her by asking about her favorite book as a child. She hesitated, then admitted she did not really have one. She never stayed in one home long enough to keep books. He frowned, as if this small truth cut deeper than her rejection of his offer. He sat on the other end of the couch, too close for comfort, but she did not move away. "Tell me what you want, Lily," he said quietly. "If you could ask for anything, what would it be?" She hugged her knees, thinking about the envelope upstairs, the weight of $1 million. She thought about the smell of cheap soap in the group homes, the cracked ceiling she had stared at when she could not sleep. She almost said money, but the word stuck in her throat because the thing she really wanted was not something Lucas Stone could pull from his bank account. "I just want to belong somewhere," she whispered. That was all she said, but it was enough. Lucas reached over and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, and the touch made her shiver. He left his hand there for a moment longer than he should have. She could smell his cologne, the warmth of him. She wondered if he could feel how fast her heart was beating under her thin sweater. When she finally looked at him, his eyes were darker than she had ever seen them. There was no demand in them now, no cold calculation, only something raw and human that scared her more than the envelope ever did. "I can give you that," he murmured. But the way he said it made her stomach twist, because she knew he was not just talking about money or contracts or empty promises. He was offering her a way out of every locked door she had ever known. And maybe a cage of a different kind. Before she could answer, Oliver's small voice broke the moment. He had woken up from a bad dream and was crying at the top of the stairs. Lily jumped to her feet, heart pounding in relief and confusion. She scooped Oliver into her arms, burying her face in his hair. She could feel Lucas watching them both, his hands hanging uselessly by his sides. The next day, Lily woke up determined to draw a line. She dressed Oliver for preschool, packed his lunch, and avoided Lucas's gaze when he came into the kitchen. He stood by the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline like he was searching for something he had lost. When she told him Oliver was ready, he only nodded. He left with Oliver that morning instead of sending the driver. Lily stood at the door as they got into the sleek black car. She watched Lucas buckle Oliver's seatbelt like a father who did not trust anyone else to do it right. Before he closed the car door, he looked back at her. The way he looked said everything they had not said the night before. That evening, Lily made herself tea and sat by the small window in her room. She tried to imagine packing her bags and walking away. She had enough saved to finish her degree if she moved into a cheap studio and gave up every little luxury she had gotten used to in this penthouse. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Oliver's face. The way he clung to her when he was scared. The way he called her name first before he called for his father. 2 days later, everything changed. Lucas came home early from a meeting that should have lasted all night. He looked tired, older somehow, and she knew before he said a word that something had shifted. He asked her to sit down. He told her about the lawyer's visit. Helen's parents had filed the official paperwork. They were demanding immediate custody of Oliver. They claimed Lucas was unfit, too cold, too absent, and the rumors about the boy's paternity were surfacing again. Lily listened with her hands pressed tight in her lap. She watched Lucas struggle to say the word court, as if it was poison on his tongue. He admitted the old DNA test had gone missing. He admitted he was afraid that if they forced a new one and it showed Oliver was not his, he would lose him forever. She did not pity him. That was the strange part. Instead, she felt something else, something sharper than pity. She felt protective, not of Lucas, but of the small boy who trusted her bedtime stories more than any bloodline. "What will you do?" she asked softly. Lucas looked at her like he was about to break. He told her the only thing the lawyer suggested. He needed to show he was building a family, not just a man with a nanny and a son he might not share blood with. A family, a stable home, a wife, a future. That was when Lily realized the envelope had never really been about a night. It had always been about the morning after, about the ring that should follow, about papers that said she belonged in this house for good, not just until Oliver turned 7 and stopped needing bedtime stories. Lucas did not offer her the envelope again. Instead, he offered her the truth. He said he did not want to buy her, but he did not know how else to ask. He had forgotten how to ask for anything he could not pay for. They sat at the kitchen island, the same place where they had shared silent breakfasts and quick nods of polite distance. But that night there was no distance left to hide behind. Lily stared at the marble countertop and told him she needed time. He nodded as if he understood, but his eyes betrayed him. He did not have time. That night she lay awake, replaying every moment she had spent in this house. She thought about the first time Oliver had called her mommy by mistake, and how Lucas had frozen in the hallway when he heard it. She thought about the way Lucas looked at her when she laughed, like he could not decide if it made him angry or alive. Around 3 a.m, she sat up and wrote a note. She told Lucas she would stay until the custody hearing was over. She would stand by him, lie if she had to, hold his hand in court, play the perfect fiancé if that was what it took. But she could not promise forever. Not yet. She slipped the note under his study door. She found Oliver's favorite blanket and crawled into the boy's bed, curling around him like a shield. She listened to his tiny snores and told herself she was doing the right thing. For him. For all the nights he would never have to spend alone. Down the hall, Lucas read her note 3 times before he let himself close his eyes. He had not won yet, but for the first time in years he felt like he could sleep without dreaming of everything he had lost. When the morning came, Lily woke up in Oliver's bed with his small hand resting on her cheek. For a moment she forgot the note she had written, the promise she had half made to a man she still did not fully understand. She let herself pretend they were just 3 people in an ordinary home where bedtime stories and breakfast messes were the only battles to fight. But the truth waited in every shadow of that penthouse. Lucas was already in the kitchen when she carried Oliver downstairs. He wore a suit but looked like he had not slept much. He poured coffee for himself, then without a word poured her a cup too. It was the smallest sign of something unspoken between them. He did not bring up her note, but she saw it folded neatly beside his laptop, like he had read it over and over through the night. Oliver chattered about preschool while Lily packed his lunch. Lucas watched her move around the kitchen the way she always did, but this morning felt different. She could sense the questions he wanted to ask, the relief he wanted to feel. She caught his eyes once, just for a second. He did not smile, but he did not look away either. For Lucas Stone, that was almost the same thing. When Oliver left with his driver, Lily found Lucas still standing by the window, staring at the city, like he might find all his answers in the skyline he built. She cleared her throat. "We should talk," she said quietly. He nodded once and gestured for her to sit at the marble island. He did not waste time. He told her everything. He explained how Helen's parents had always hated him, how they blamed him for things they would never prove but always whispered about. He admitted that Helen had threatened him with secrets she never fully revealed. She had hinted that Oliver might not be his child, but she never showed him proof. When she died, the question became a ghost in his head that never left him alone. He told Lily about the missing DNA test, how it vanished from his lawyer's office, how he suspected Helen's family destroyed it to keep the rumor alive. The more they made him look like a fraud, the easier it would be to tear Oliver from his arms. Lily listened without interrupting, her fingers curled around the warm mug, just to keep herself steady. "Why didn't you just do another test?" she asked finally. Lucas's jaw tensed. "Because if the result was what I feared, I would lose him anyway. I chose not to know. I thought pretending was enough." She almost said pretending is never enough, But the words died on her tongue because she could see he already knew that. He looked at her then, his eyes darker than the coffee he never touched. "I am asking you to stand beside me because I do not trust myself to stand alone. I am asking you to lie if you have to. I am asking you to look a judge in the eye and swear we are a family." Lily's heartbeat drummed in her ears. "And after?" she asked. "When the court is over, when they leave us alone, what happens then?" Lucas was silent for a long moment. Then he said the only thing she did not expect to hear. "I do not know." He reached across the counter, his hand hovering over hers. "I know this is not love. I know I have no right to ask for that from you. But I promise you this. You and Oliver will never need anything again. You will have a home, protection, a name no one can touch." The promise tasted like iron in her mouth. It was exactly what she used to dream about as a girl lying awake in a crowded foster home. Safety, belonging, a name to wear like armor. But here in the soft morning light, she realized how little that dream matched what she really wanted. She asked him, almost a whisper, "And what do you want, Lucas?" He hesitated. Then his voice dropped so low she had to lean closer to hear him. "I want him to be mine, even if he is not. I want to believe I am enough for him to stay, and if I cannot be enough alone, I want you beside me because you are the only real thing left." She could not look at him when he said that. Instead, she stood up and rinsed her mug, her back turned so he would not see the confusion on her face. She hated him a little in that moment, for making her want to comfort him when he was the reason she felt trapped. But when she looked back, the anger faded. He looked so tired, so utterly human. That night she lay awake again, watching the city lights dance across her ceiling. She remembered his hand reaching for hers, the soft tremor in his voice. He was not a man used to begging. He was a man used to buying solutions. Yet here he was asking for her, not because she was expensive, but because she could not be bought so easily. Days turned into a blur of phone calls with lawyers and whispered plans. Lily tried to act normal for Oliver's sake. She read him bedtime stories. She packed his favorite snacks. She laughed when he asked if she would always live with him and Daddy. Her heart ached every time he said Daddy, so small and certain that the world would never change. Lucas kept his distance, but every night she heard him pacing in his study, long after Oliver fell asleep. Once she found him in the kitchen at 3 a.m, staring at an old family photo of Helen holding baby Oliver. He did not notice her at first. When he did not hide the picture. He just looked at her and said quietly, "Do you think she ever loved me?" Lily did not answer because she knew he was not really asking her. He was asking the shadows of a life he no longer trusted. A week before the hearing, Lily found the envelope again. She pulled it from her drawer, her hands trembling. She thought about ripping it up, but instead she tucked it into her coat pocket and walked into Lucas's study. He looked up, surprised. She dropped the envelope in front of him. "I do not want this." He did not touch it. He waited. She took a shaky breath. "I will stand with you. I will say yes if the judge asks, but not because you paid me. If we do this, it will be real, or it will be nothing." Lucas's eyes flickered with something like relief, but also fear. "Do you understand what that means?" he asked. She nodded. "It means I am not for sale. Not for one night. Not for 1 million. If I say yes, I stay because I choose to, and you do not get to decide when I leave." Lucas stood up slowly, like he was afraid if he moved too fast she would disappear. He crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. He did not reach for her. He just whispered, "Thank you, Lily." She stepped back, needing space before she did something foolish like forgive him too soon. That night she slept in her own bed, the envelope gone for good. She pressed her hand over her heart and told herself this was not about love, not yet. It was about a little boy who deserved to wake up every morning in the same house, knowing that no one would take him away just because adults were too selfish to fight for him. She would stand by Lucas because Oliver needed her. What she had not yet admitted, not even to herself, was that maybe she needed Lucas too, in ways she was not ready to name. The day of the custody hearing arrived cold and gray. Lily woke before dawn, listening to the steady sound of Oliver's breathing beside her. He had crawled into her bed sometime after midnight, whispering that he'd had a bad dream about being taken away. She held him until he drifted off again, her palm resting over his tiny heart, as if she could anchor him to her chest forever. Downstairs, Lucas was already dressed when she came into the kitchen. He wore a dark suit, his hair perfectly combed, but his eyes were restless. He looked at her and then at Oliver's backpack in her hand. "Thank you for staying," he said quietly, as if the words cost him more than all the money he had ever made. Lily just nodded. She poured herself a cup of coffee she did not even drink. The car ride to the courthouse was silent, except for Oliver's soft humming as he held Lily's hand. Lucas sat opposite them, his knee bouncing slightly. Lily noticed how his thumb kept brushing against the edge of his watch, a small nervous tick she had never seen before. When Oliver dozed off against her shoulder, Lucas finally spoke. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice low. She looked at him, searching his face for the man he was before all this. "I don't regret him," she said. That was the only answer she had. The courthouse was a tall gray building that smelled like cold air and old paper. Reporters lingered outside, hoping for a glimpse of the stone fortune being dragged through the mud. Lucas ignored them, his hand on Lily's back as they moved through the security line. He looked like a man who could control a boardroom with a single look, but inside these walls he was just another father, hoping a judge would see him as good enough. Inside the hearing room, Helen's parents sat stiffly beside their lawyer, faces carved from the same cold stone as the building. They did not glance at Oliver, but they stared at Lily as if she were a stain they planned to scrub away. She held her chin up, her hand resting lightly on Oliver's shoulder. The boy fidgeted with the edge of her blouse, wide-eyed but calm, trusting that his world would stay whole as long as she stayed close. The judge arrived, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes behind silver glasses. She wasted no time. The lawyers spoke first. Helen's parents painted Lucas as an absent father, a man who left his son in the hands of hired help while he built empires and hid secrets. They brought up the rumors about the missing DNA test, the whispered doubts about Oliver's bloodline. Every word made Lucas's jaw tighten, but he did not interrupt. Then it was Lucas's lawyer's turn. He spoke carefully, presenting photos of Lucas and Oliver together, notes from doctors, statements from teachers. But the judge's eyes flicked to Lily more than once, as if she knew the truth rested not in the papers but in the woman holding the child, who did not share her blood, yet clung to her like family. Finally, the judge asked Lily to stand. She rose, her knees steady only because she felt Oliver's small fingers brush against hers. "Miss Bennet," the judge began, "you have worked for Mr. Stone for how long?" "Almost 3 years," Lily answered. "And in that time, what is your relationship to the child?" Lily glanced at Lucas, then back at the judge. "He calls me his Lily. He tells people I'm like his mom." Helen's mother scoffed under her breath. The judge silenced her with a look. "And are you?" the judge asked softly. "Are you his mother?" Lily felt Lucas's eyes on her. She felt the entire room leaning into her next breath. "I am not his mother by blood," she said slowly, "but I am the one who holds him when he's sick, who tells him stories when he's scared, who sits outside his door when he has nightmares. I am the one he runs to when he wants to feel safe. So yes, maybe I am his mother in every way that matters." The room fell quiet. The judge leaned back, her fingers tapping the bench. "And your relationship to Mr. Stone?" Lily swallowed. "He is the father of the child I love. And he asked you to be more than that? Didn't he?" Lily's heart pounded. "Yes, he asked me to stay, not just as a nanny, but as his wife." Helen's lawyer shot up. "Objection," he said sharply. "Convenient arrangement, Your Honor. No marriage certificate, no proof, just words." The judge raised a hand. "Miss Bennet, are you willing to marry Mr. Stone?" Lily's throat tightened. She felt Oliver's weight against her side, small and warm. She looked at Lucas, who was standing now, his eyes locked on hers. "Yes," she said clearly, "I am willing. Not because he paid me, not because he asked, but because I choose to stand here beside him and Oliver." The judge's eyes softened for a breath. "Do you understand what that means for you?" Lily nodded once. "I do." The lawyer for Helen's parents tried to speak, but the judge waved him off. She turned to Lucas. "Do you have anything to add?" Lucas stepped forward. For a moment the room seemed too small to hold the quiet power in his voice. "Oliver is my son. Maybe not by blood, maybe I will never know for sure, but I am his father because I am the one who stayed, and I will not let anyone take him from me while I still have breath in my body." He looked at Lily then. "And she is the only one I trust to help me protect him." He reached out and took her hand in front of everyone, his grip warm and firm. The judge studied them for a long moment. Then she looked down at Oliver, who peeked up from behind Lily's leg. "Do you love them, young man?" Oliver nodded shyly, his small voice clear. "Lily's my Lily, Daddy is my dad." It was enough. The judge closed her file with a soft snap that echoed louder than any gavel. "I see no grounds to remove the child from his home. This family stays together." Her words fell like a stone into the quiet. Helen's parents stiffened. Their lawyer sputtered something about appeals, but Lily barely heard it. Oliver threw his arms around her waist, hugging her so tight she thought she might break in half from the relief. Lucas did not speak. He just stood there with her hand in his other hand resting on Oliver's small shoulder, his chest rising and falling like a man who could finally breathe again. Outside the courthouse, the wind was biting. Reporters tried to swarm them, but Lucas shielded her with his body. He lifted Oliver into his arms while Lily clutched the boy's backpack with shaking fingers. They reached the waiting car without a word to the camera. Inside the warmth, Lily looked at Lucas. He was watching her with an expression she could not name. She whispered thank you, but he shook his head. "No, Lily, thank you for saying yes." She could not bring herself to answer, not yet. Not with Oliver's sleepy head pressed against her side and the city whirling by in a blur of cold glass and distant lights. She only knew one thing for certain. They had won this battle, but the real war was just beginning, because somewhere between the lies and the court papers and the nights she spent dreaming of escape, she had given this broken billionaire and his quiet little boy a piece of herself she could never take back. Back at the penthouse, the city lights seemed softer, as if New York itself exhaled when they stepped through the door. Lily carried Oliver upstairs, his small body warm and heavy in her arms. He was half asleep, his face pressed to her neck, mumbling about bedtime stories and whether the bad people would come back. She kissed his forehead and told him no one would take him away, not now, not ever. He believed her without question. Downstairs, Lucas stood by the window, his jacket draped over a chair, his tie loosened for the first time in weeks. He looked older than he had that morning, not from defeat, but from relief that settled in his shoulders. When Lily came down after putting Oliver to bed, she found him staring out over Manhattan like he was trying to see the future in the pattern of city lights. He turned when he heard her, his expression soft but unreadable. "Thank you is not enough," he said after a moment. She shook her head. "You do not owe me anything, Lucas." His laugh was quiet and humorless. "That is the problem, Lily. I owe you everything." She crossed the room slowly, standing near enough to feel the heat radiating from him but not touching. The silence stretched until he broke it. "I do not know what happens now. I only know I cannot go back to the way it was." "Neither can I," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. He stepped closer, his fingers brushing her wrist like he was testing if she would pull away. She did not. He looked into her eyes the way he had that night in her doorway, when he had offered her money instead of a promise. But this time there was no envelope, no bargain, just a man and a woman standing on the edge of something neither of them could name. "I thought money would fix it," he said quietly. I thought if I paid enough, pushed hard enough, I could control every outcome. But today in that courtroom I realized you were never something I could buy, Lily." She felt the truth of it settle into her bones. "Then why did you try?" she asked. His thumb traced her pulse where it raced beneath her skin. "Because I was afraid to ask you to stay for free." He exhaled like the confession cost him something bigger than pride. "I did not trust that I was enough for you to choose me without a price." Lily's heart cracked at the edges of his honesty. She wanted to hate him for it, but instead she felt her anger dissolve like sugar in tea. She saw him as he really was, not a billionaire wrapped in armor, but a father who had built walls so high he had forgotten what it felt like to be seen through them. She lifted her hand and rested it on his chest. His heart thudded under her palm, steady but unguarded. "Lucas," she whispered, "you are enough for Oliver. Maybe that is enough for me too." He closed his eyes, his forehead lowering until it touched hers. She could feel his breath, warm and unsteady. His hands cupped her jaw, gentle but certain, as if he was memorizing her face like a promise he could keep this time. When he kissed her, it was not urgent or possessive. It was careful, like a man testing the ground after a long winter, afraid the ice might break but daring to step anyway. Her hands slid up to his shoulders, fingers digging into the soft fabric of his shirt. When they parted, he did not speak, just rested his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling in the quiet space between them. They moved together without a plan. Upstairs, the hallway felt different now, less like a corridor of secrets, and more like a bridge between what they were and what they might become. In his room, they undressed each other without hurry. Lily's hands trembled when she traced the scar on his shoulder from an old car accident, the one that had taken Helen but left him behind. He caught her fingers, pressed them to his lips, then to his chest, where his heart still beat stubbornly despite everything it had endured. When he laid her down on his bed, there was no sense of debt, no lingering echo of the envelope that had once sat heavy between them. There was only the hush of skin against skin, the soft exhale of trust given where it was never owed. He whispered her name more than once, like a prayer, like an apology, like a vow. Hours later, they lay tangled together beneath the sheets. The city hummed beyond the glass walls, but inside this room there was only the rhythm of their breathing and the warmth of two people who had decided, without saying it aloud, that pretending was no longer enough. Lily rested her head on his chest, her palms played over the slow rise and fall of his ribs. She could feel the truth of him in the quiet, in the way he held her like he was afraid she would vanish if he let go. "I do not know how to do this," Lucas murmured into her hair. She smiled against his skin. "Neither do I," she whispered back, "but maybe we do not have to get it right all at once." He tilted her chin until she looked at him. His eyes were so close, so honest, it almost hurt to hold his gaze. "Stay," he said simply. "Stay for real this time." She nodded once, the word caught in her throat, but her answer written in the way she pressed closer instead of pulling away. In the days that followed, their world shifted in small ways first. Lucas canceled meetings that had once seemed untouchable, spending mornings making pancakes that Oliver found hilarious because his father burned them every time. Lily found herself laughing more than she had in years. She caught Lucas watching her sometimes over the breakfast table, his eyes soft in a way that made her stomach flutter and her heart ache all at once. One rainy afternoon, she found an old box in the back of Lucas's study. Inside were Helen's journals, yellowed pages that smelled faintly of perfume and dust. Lily sat on the floor, knees tucked under her, reading words that painted a version of Lucas she almost did not recognize. In the pages, Helen wrote of anger and guilt, of secrets she never shared but hinted at. There were lines scratched out, torn corners, unfinished sentences that made Lily's chest tighten with questions. When Lucas found her there, he did not get angry. He sat down beside her and took the journal from her hands. He flipped to a page near the end, one she had missed. It was a single line in Helen's looping script. "Sometimes I wish I could tell him the truth, but I know it would ruin him more than the lie ever will." Lucas's hands trembled as he closed the book. "I spent so long believing I was the villain in her story," he said, his voice so low she had to lean in to hear him. "Maybe we both were." Lily rested her head on his shoulder. "Maybe you were just two broken people who did not know how to stay whole together." He turned his face, pressing his lips to her hair. "Maybe," he whispered, "but I am done pretending that her ghosts get to decide who I am now." A week later, Lily found herself standing in the doctor's office, staring at the test in her shaking hands. 2 lines. She laughed, a startled sound that turned into tears she could not stop. She pressed her palm to her stomach, whispering to the tiny heartbeat she could not yet feel, "You are real. You are ours." When she told Lucas, he sank to his knees in front of her, his forehead pressed to her belly. He whispered thank you like she had given him a gift he never dared ask for. She cupped his face, made him look at her. "This is not payment for anything," she said fiercely. "This is not a debt. This is ours because we chose it." His eyes shone as he nodded. "I know, Lily. I know." Later that night, they lay in bed with Oliver squeezed between them. He was giggling at something silly Lily whispered in his ear. Lucas watched them both, his arm draped over them like a promise. He knew the fight was not over. There would be more lawyers, more whispers, more people waiting for him to fail. But for the first time, he did not feel alone on the battlefield. He leaned in close, brushing his lips against Lily's temple. "I spent my whole life trying to buy the things that mattered most," he murmured, so only she could hear. "But you showed me some things cannot be bought." She turned her face toward him, her smile soft but sure. "Some things have to be chosen," she said, "and I choose you, Lucas." Over and over, outside the city kept breathing. The world did not care that somewhere high above Fifth Avenue, a broken billionaire and the girl he once tried to buy had chosen to build something real instead. But inside that room, their world felt small and unshakable, built not from contracts or secrets, but from the quiet, stubborn truth that love, once earned, could never be priced. Spring came late that year, but when it did, the city bloomed as if it had been waiting for their story to end the way it deserved. 3 months after the hearing, Lily stood barefoot on the balcony of the penthouse that no longer felt like a cold tower but a real home. She held a cup of tea that had gone cold in her hands. Inside, Oliver was chasing toy cars across the living room floor, his giggles echoing off the high walls. Lucas watched him from the sofa, a soft grin on his face that still caught Lily off guard. She had learned to love that look because it was never for anyone but her and their boy. Lucas stepped outside and slipped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. He felt warm and steady, the kind of warmth Lily had dreamed of, back when she had nothing but hand-me-down sweaters and borrowed blankets to keep the cold away. She leaned back against him and closed her eyes as the wind tugged at her hair. "Do you remember the night you offered me that envelope?" she asked. His low laugh rumbled against her spine. "I try not to," he said. "It was the worst way I could have asked you to stay." She smiled, eyes still closed. "And the best thing you ever did?" He turned her gently, so she was facing him. "How do you figure that?" he asked. "If you hadn't done it," she said, "I might never have known how far you'd go to keep what matters." He brushed his thumb over her cheek. "I'd go farther than that, Lily." She caught his hand and pressed it to her belly where the smallest bump had just started to show. "I know," she whispered. Inside, Oliver called for them. Lily stepped away and Lucas followed, his hand brushing hers, a promise in that simple touch that felt stronger than any contract he had ever signed. In the living room, Oliver sat on the floor, surrounded by crayons and paper. He held up a drawing, all crooked lines and bright colors. "This is us," he said proudly. "Daddy, Lily, me, and baby." Lucas crouched beside him and pulled him close, pressing a kiss to his hair. Lily sat next to them, her heart so full it almost hurt. That night, after Oliver was asleep, they sat together on the couch in the hush of the penthouse that no longer felt like glass and steel but something softer, lived in, real. Lucas looked at her like he always did now. No walls left, no secrets left to keep her out. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" he asked. Lily turned so she was curled against him, her head on his chest. "I think we build it one morning at a time, one bedtime story at a time." She felt his laugh in the rise of his chest. He pressed his lips to her forehead. "No more pretending," he said. She looked up at him and smiled. "No more pretending. Just us." Outside the city pulsed with its usual noise, but in that room the world was quiet. A small island of truth in a place where everything once had a price. Lily had come here as someone who knew how to run when love cost too much. Now she stayed because she had learned the simplest secret of all. The best things could never be bought. When she closed her eyes that night, she heard Oliver's soft breathing down the hall and felt Lucas's heartbeat under her cheek. She drifted to sleep knowing that no matter how imperfect their beginning had been, they had made something real out of something that once felt impossible. She had once told herself that love was not for sale. Now she knew it was true. Some things had to be chosen, over and over, every day, and she would choose this, him, them, always.